Have you ever had a day where absolutely everything depended on a single morning? A day you had been dreaming about, planning for, and losing sleep over for weeks? Well, let me tell you about my Tuesday. For me, that was the day everything was supposed to change. My name is Emma, and if you had asked me on Monday night how I felt, I would have told you I was completely ready. I felt like I was on top of the world. For 3 long weeks, I had been preparing for the final interview at Creative Solutions. They are one of the most famous advertising agencies in the city, and getting a job there as a junior designer was my ultimate dream. I had spent days researching the company, practicing answers to tricky questions in front of my mirror, and selecting the perfect outfit. This is it, Emma, I told myself while looking at my reflection that evening. Tomorrow is. I am usually a bit disorganized, I have to admit. I am the kind of person who loses her keys inside her own purse or forgets where she parked her bicycle. But for this specific Tuesday, I promised myself I would be the most organized person alive. Being late was simply not an option. The interview was scheduled for exactly 9:30 a.m. To be absolutely safe, I decided to set multiple alarms. I didn't just set one, I set 3. I turned on my old digital alarm clock that sits on my nightstand and set it for 6:30 a.m. Then I took my smartphone and set an alarm for 6:35 a.m. Finally, just in case my phone decided to update its software during the night, I set an alarm on my old tablet for 6:40 a.m. 3 alarms, I whispered to my cat, Barnaby, who was yawning at the end of the bed. Not even a sleeping beauty could sleep through that. I placed my ironed white blouse and smart black trousers neatly on the chair. My portfolio, a large folder filled with my best artwork and design projects, was resting safely by the front door. Next to it lay my keys. I checked everything twice. I felt incredibly confident, proud of my maturity, and ready to conquer the world. I turned off the lights at 10 p.m., closed my eyes, and fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, imagining myself walking through the glass doors of Creative Solutions as their newest employee. You know that strange feeling you get when you wake up and something just feels wrong? The room is too bright, the street outside is too noisy. The birds aren't singing their early morning songs anymore. Instead, you hear the heavy traffic of people already driving to work. That was exactly how I woke up. I didn't wake up to a loud, annoying beep. I woke up to total silence, followed by the distant sound of a car horn. I blinked against the bright sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. I turned my head lazily to look at my digital alarm clock on the nightstand. The screen was completely black. No numbers, no glowing red lights, nothing. My heart did a sudden violent flip inside my chest. I reached for my smartphone on the floor. I pressed the main button. The screen lit up, and the numbers displayed on it made my breath catch in my throat. 8:15 a.m. No, this can't be real, I screamed, jumping out of bed so fast that I accidentally kicked poor Barnaby's favorite toy across the room. I rushed to the kitchen. The digital clock on the microwave was flashing 12 o'clock. That was when I realized what had happened. There had been a power outage during the night. The electricity must have gone off for just a few minutes, but that was enough to turn off my digital clock completely. But what about my phone? What about my tablet? I checked my phone settings with shaking fingers. In my deep exhaustion the night before, I had accidentally set the phone alarms for PM instead of AM. My tablet? Its battery had mysteriously drained to 0%. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my body. I had exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes to get to the other side of the city. Calm down, Emma. You can still make it if you move like lightning, I muttered to myself, though my voice was trembling. I ran to the bathroom. There was no time for a relaxing shower. I threw some cold water on my face, brushed my teeth so quickly that toothpaste splattered onto my cheek, and brushed my hair into a messy bun. I ran back to the bedroom and scrambled into my interview clothes. Because I was rushing, my hands were shaking like leaves in the wind. I decided I needed a quick sip of coffee to wake my brain up. I had prepared a cold brew coffee in the fridge the night before. I poured it into a travel mug, but as I tried to rush toward the door, my foot caught the edge of the living room rug. A large, dark brown wave of coffee flew out of the mug and landed directly on the front of my pristine white blouse. I stood there in absolute shock. I wanted to cry. I wanted to crawl back into bed, pull the blanket over my head, and pretend Tuesday didn't exist. The blouse was completely ruined. "Think, Emma, think!" I shouted at myself. I sprinted back to my closet, pulled out a simple, somewhat faded blue sweater, and threw it on. It wasn't as professional as the blouse, but it was clean. I grabbed my design portfolio from by the door, opened the front door, ran out, and slammed it shut behind me. It was only when I reached the ground floor of my apartment building that I realized two terrible things. First, in my panic, I had left my wallet with my credit cards and cash on the kitchen counter. Second, I had missed my usual 8:20 a.m. bus. As I ran onto the sidewalk, I saw the big red bus disappearing around the corner, half a block away. I stood on the sidewalk, panting heavily, my portfolio clutched tightly under my arm. My mind was racing. No wallet meant no subway ticket. I looked inside my coat pocket and, by some absolute miracle, found a £5 note and a few loose coins. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a single bus ticket if I could catch the next one. The next bus didn't arrive until 8:40 a.m. When I finally climbed aboard, the driver looked at me with sympathy as I dropped my loose coins into the machine. The bus was crowded, hot, and smelled of wet umbrellas. And then, the universe decided to test me even further. As the bus moved onto the main avenue, we hit a wall of red brake lights. "Attention passengers," the driver's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "There is a major traffic delay ahead due to road construction. We will be moving slowly." I checked my phone. 8:55 a.m. My stomach felt like it was tied in 100 tight knots. I opened my map app to see if there was a quicker walking route, but just as the map started to load, a terrifying little box popped up on my screen. Battery at 2%. Shutting down. The screen went black. My phone was dead. No map, no way to call the company to say I was running late, and no way to call a taxi through an app. "Excuse me," I said to a businessman standing next to me on the bus. "Do you know if this bus goes near High Street?" "High Street?" the man replied, looking up from his newspaper. "No. Regular traffic is being redirected. This bus is turning left at the next light. You're going to be quite far from High Street." Panic turned into pure desperation. "Thank you," I gasped. At the next stop, I leaped off the bus. I didn't really know where I was, but I knew the general direction of the downtown area. I started to walk as fast as my smart shoes would allow. Then I started to jog. A girl running down the street holding a massive black portfolio folder must have looked hilarious, but I didn't care. Naturally, that was the exact moment the weather forecast decided to lie to me. The blue sky disappeared behind heavy, dark gray clouds. Within 2 minutes, it wasn't just raining, it was pouring. It was a torrential downpour. I didn't have an umbrella. I tried to shield my precious design portfolio with my body, hugging it tightly against my chest so the rain wouldn't ruin the paper inside. My hair, which had been in a neat bun, was now wet and dripping down my neck. My blue sweater was soaked and heavy. My feet were slipping inside my shoes. I stopped under the small awning of a closed shop, trying to catch my breath. I looked at a clock in a jewelry store window. 9:18 a.m. I was lost, soaked to the bone, without a phone, without money, and I had 12 minutes left before the most important interview of my life. Tears mixed with the rain on my face. "I've ruined it," I whispered, feeling completely defeated. "I've ruined my entire career before it even started." As I stood there shivering, feeling sorry for myself, the door of a small bakery next to me opened. A warm, delicious smell of fresh bread and cinnamon rolled out into the cold street. A middle-aged man wearing a flour-dusted apron stepped out to sweep some rain away from the entrance. He looked at me, noticed my wet hair, my shivering shoulders, and the giant portfolio I was protecting like a newborn baby. "Rough morning, huh?" he asked with a kind, crinkly smile. "The worst morning of my life," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I have a job interview on High Street in 10 minutes. My phone died, I'm lost, and I don't even know which way to walk." The baker stopped sweeping. He looked at my portfolio and then looked down the street. "High Street is about a 15-minute walk from here if you know the shortcuts, but in this rain, you'll be a swimming pool by the time you arrive. Wait here a second." He disappeared back into his shop. A moment later, he returned holding a large, sturdy black umbrella and a portable phone charger. "Take the umbrella," he said, pressing it into my hand. "And here, plug your phone into this power bank. You can bring them back to me whenever you get the job." I stared at him, stunned by his generosity. "Are you serious? But you don't even know me." "I know what it's like to have a bad day," he said, with a wink. "Now hurry up. Go down this street, take the second right, and you'll see the main square. High Street is just across from it." "Thank you so much," I cried, plugging my phone in. As the screen came back to life, I saw it was 9:22 a.m. I ran down the street, holding the baker's umbrella high. But even with the shortcut, my legs were tired and the clock was ticking. As I reached the edge of the main square, I saw an old, traditional black taxi parked by the curb. The driver was sitting inside, reading a magazine. I knocked urgently on the window. "Need a lift, love?" "I desperately need to go to number 42 High Street," I said quickly. "But I have a massive problem. I left my wallet at home. I only have £5. Is there any way you can take me that far for £5? I know it's not enough, but I'm going to be late for my dream interview." The taxi driver, an older man with gray hair and a friendly face, looked at the £5 note in my hand, then at my wet clothes, and finally at my determined eyes. He sighed and unlocked the doors. "Hop in," he said. "The rules say no cash, no ride. But my daughter had an interview last week and she was terrified. Consider this a favor from a dad." I climbed into the warm back seat, feeling a wave of immense gratitude. As he drove through the splashing streets, the driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Listen to me, young lady," he said calmly as he navigated the heavy traffic. "You're stressed out. Your heart is beating fast. But don't let a bad morning ruin your confidence. When you walk into that room, they aren't hiring your clothes or your alarm clock. They are hiring you. Take a deep breath. Forget the rain. Forget the traffic. Just show them who you are." His words acted like a soothing balm on my panic. I closed my eyes, took a deep, steadying breath, and felt my confidence slowly returning. "You're right," I said, smiling at him. "Thank you." The taxi pulled up outside the grand glass tower of Creative Solutions at exactly 9:35 a.m. I was 5 minutes late. I thanked the kind driver, handed him my last £5, and ran through the rain into the beautiful modern lobby. The floor was shiny, and everyone walking around looked incredibly neat, professional, and dry. Then there was me, wearing a damp blue sweater, wet shoes that made a loud squeak sound with every step, and hair that looked like a bird had built a nest in it. I walked up to the reception desk, my heart in my mouth. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am Emma Harrison. I am here for the junior designer interview with Miss Vance. I know I am 5 minutes late, and I am incredibly sorry." The receptionist looked at my damp clothes and gave me a polite, professional smile. "Please take the elevator to the 5th floor, Miss Harrison. Miss Vance's assistant is waiting for you." When I reached the 5th floor, I was shown into a large, beautiful meeting room with a massive oak table. Sitting at the table was Miss Vance, the head of design. She looked exactly like her pictures online, elegant, sharp, and very intimidating. "Ah, Emma," Miss Vance said, looking up from her tablet. She looked at her watch. "I am so sorry, Miss Vance," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "My power went out last night, my alarm didn't go off, I overslept, I spilled coffee on my only good shirt, my phone died, and I had no money for the bus. I had to run through the rain, and I only made it here because a kind baker lent me an umbrella and a wonderful taxi driver gave me a cheap ride. I know I look a mess, but I cared so much about this opportunity that I couldn't give up." Miss Vance stared at me for what felt like an eternity. The room was completely silent. I was certain she was about to ask me to leave. Then, slowly, the corners of her mouth twitched, and she let out a loud, warm laugh. "Well, Emma," Miss Vance said, gesturing for me to sit down, "that is certainly the most entertaining explanation I've heard all week. Do you know how many candidates we were supposed to interview today?" "No, ma'am," I replied. "We had 6 candidates scheduled before you," Mrs. Vance said, leaning forward. 3 of them called to cancel because of the heavy rain and the traffic delays. They said it was too difficult to get downtown today. But you faced a power outage, a coffee disaster, no money, and a rainstorm, and you still showed up. That tells me a lot about your character before I even look at your work." She smiled warmly.